Hey guys, in this chapter we're going to be finishing up the theory section against the London, and this time we're going to be looking at what happens if we play the Dutch, the King's Indian, or the Grenville. Alright, I hope you enjoy. d4, f5, knight f3, knight f6, bishop f4. I'm not going to go into detailed theory so much as just give a general overview of ideas, and there's plenty of other ways black can play. So because the London is a system, it's some general setup. So the way I see it in these positions is the bishop on f4 is slightly misplaced because black is not committed to d5 yet. Therefore, when black plays pawn to d6, it restricts the bishop on f4 and black gets a better version of normal lines, like for example in the classical Dutch. So this bishop can also be a target to knight h5 and also in some positions even e5 after preparation, like for example knight c6, d6. Maybe you'll bring the queen to e8, the bishop to d8, and then e5 as one example of a typical plan that is in the classical Dutch style. And of course all of your usual ideas can work, and you can even think out of that bishop. Okay, there's the Leningrad and all that too, but I'm trying to give an overview of ideas. You can go elsewhere for detailed theory, because I'm recommending this mainly as a d4, d5 repertoire. So on knight f6, unless you play a Grenville or King's Indian, you're almost definitely going to transpose after bishop f4, d5, and there's just no meaningful deviations essentially except maybe dc5, but it doesn't really matter because you can just play all the typical ideas, grab the pawn back, I mean even do this. It's just like, I think I gave some long theory with bishop d7, but that was just more like to show an idea that wasn't the main line at the time in some fun way of, I don't know. It's just like black has a million moves. White can't keep the pawn without at least giving black compensation, and he can just win it back. So I don't have overkill on the theory. I request that if you're more interested in these details, check the reference file, and instead here, we're going to move on and go to knight f3. Okay, knight f3, something like g6 for example. I mean, personally, I'd play d5 and then transpose probably after bishop f4, c5, or go for some sort of semi-Slav stuff. But okay, so but let's say g6, knight f3, g6, bishop f4, bishop g7, and I think that this is just a little committal for white, at least at a conceptual level for me. I'm not saying it's not worth it. And the reason for that is black has not committed to playing pawn to d6 yet. Sorry, pawn to d5 yet. Therefore, this bishop can be restricted and a target. For example, after something like e3, typical London moves, bishop e2. Okay, I'm being generous. I'll explain why bishop e2 instead of bishop d3 in a moment. Then this bishop on f4 is just a target. You can play knight bd7, rook e8, and then e5 to target that bishop. And a typical trap is if the bishop was on d3, then e4 would be a nice fork. Of course, you can also just develop your pieces, and simple chess. Very straightforward, targeted bishop, easy development, no problems. White has to be careful. So going back, white can also play 4 knight c3, and the difference is if black plays castles or d6, then after e4, white has a better center than black does, or black has a counterattack against the center. And personally, I find it harder to play these sort of hyper-modern positions where I counterattack the opponent's center when they already have the center. And I would imagine that a lot of club players would feel the same way as me. Just studying the classics, I would find it easier to start with a classical way of trying to control the center, like Tarrasch, for example, maybe. Before going off too much into the wetlands. Okay, that's not fair. I like Nimzovich too much. Okay, let's not talk about that right now. Okay, so d5 though is one way to prevent the opponent from playing e4, and well, hold on. Isn't his bishop not as restricted? We haven't played d6, but this knight on c3 is misplaced because I'm just talking positionally. Maybe there's compensation, but conceptually the knight on c3 is misplaced because in queen pawn openings, white generally wants to play c4 before knight c3, and the knight generally gets restricted after normal moves like c6, where it's just lacking squares. And again, I'm just trying to give an overview here. Against some sort of normal developing plan, black can play just about any move, but c5 opens the diagonal for the bishop. We almost always win the pawn back. Easy. I mean, it's just white's non-threatening. So something like queen d2 is also possible, but okay, I'm just trying to show the ideas. Black can play knight e4 at some point. In fact, he can place that right now, taking advantage of the targeted knight on f3. And after queen to e3, well, I mean, if he takes it, then this pawn is weak. Black can protect the center pawn on e4, have a fantastic position. There's pawn breaks pawn to e5. And pawn to c5 coming. White is not castled. Castling queenside is risky. You know, simple chess. So queen e3, queen d6, and It's just good development. So, okay, I don't know. I don't want to focus on the theory. I want to summarize the ideas. The general summary is that in the London system, where black plays d5, black is going to play the c5, knight c6, knight f6, and queen b6 lines to target the b2 pawn, and take advantage of white having not played c4. If you commit to playing knight f6, you're probably going to transpose with d5, unless you fianchetto your bishop. In general, when they bring their bishop to f4, you want to counter it by targeting the bishop directly, although you can also play d5 sometimes, and black should be doing fine.